My name is Scott Reese, and we welcome you to Explore the Arts, a look-in tonight with Mary Poppins. And we are so lucky to have 4 of the cast members. I'm going to let them go down the line and introduce themselves and make sure that we have sound for everybody.
Hello, my name's Caroline Sheen, and I play the role of Mary Poppins.
Hi there, I'm Gavin Lee. I play the role of Bert.
Hello, I'm Blythe Wilson, and I play Mrs. Banks, the mum.
And I'm Laird Mackintosh, and I play Mr. Banks.
Great. I saw the show on Sunday night, and as Mary would say, it's practically perfect. And I was with a 10-year-old friend of mine, and we were just amazed at so many different parts of the show. The show's been running, I guess, for about 4 years now on Broadway, and you guys are now doing the touring production of it. And I believe that you're here at the Kennedy Center until August 22nd. Is that right? So on part of the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
And I think with this panel, this is the first completely international panel that I've had. That we have 2 Canadians, correct?
Yes. 2 Canadians, yes.
1 from Wales.
That's me.
And 1 from the UK. All right, there we go. We got them in the right order. I am going to start this by embarrassing myself. I think all of us have some sort of, how would you say, an introduction to the land of Mary Poppins. For me, it was seeing the film when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I loved it so much, and this before I had any inklings of theater. And I really thought that I could fly like Mary Poppins if I believed so. And my brother, who was 3 years older, really egged me on. And my sisters had the Mary Poppins umbrella. Any of the girls here have the Mary Poppins umbrella? Okay. And he said it was magical, and if you really believe, if you go up on top of the roof and you jump off, that you can fly just like Mary Poppins. Well, I was 8 years old. Guess what I did? I got up there, I closed my eyes, and I jumped off of our roof. Thank goodness I was young, and it was only the first floor, so I only sprained my ankle. And I go, do I tell on my brother and he gets in trouble, or do I get in trouble for being so stupid of jumping off the thing? But it introduced me to theater and how you believe and how it can change you, and I was so into Mary Poppins that I thought that I could fly. But guess what? I couldn't, so don't try this at home. I want to start by going down the line and just telling a little bit about yourselves, of what we don't see on the resume, of where you grew up, how you got interested in the arts, and any theater teachers, mentors, dance singers, anything that comes up to you of your introduction into the arts and schooling.
Okay, well, I was born and brought up in South Wales, which is it's not the richest part of the UK. You know, it's a mining country really. There's like lots of coal miners and lots of rugby, and it has a very strong history of singing. The Welsh people are known for being able to sing and being able to play rugby and to be able to dig up coal. I started getting involved in theatre because my parents were actually involved in amateur dramatics and the local operatic society, which I think is sort of known as community theatre here. And I used to go and watch them doing their shows and seeing them. It was so colourful, and they were all pretending to be something else, and all the girls looked pretty in their pretty dresses, and I used to just love it. And they started doing shows with parts for children in. My first show was South Pacific. And I did that, and then somebody told me when I was about 10 years old that people actually did what that is as a job and got paid to do it, and that idea was mind-blowing to me. I was just, really? You don't have to sit at an office? You know, my parents were both teachers. I just assumed, teaching and working hard really was something you got paid for, not prancing around on stage in a costume. So I joined my local youth theatre. I joined that society that my parents were involved with, and then I joined the National Youth Theatre of Wales, and just fed my passion for theatre more and more. And my cousin is also an actor. He's about 7 years older than me. He's the actor Michael Sheen, who is doing incredibly well in film. And he went off, when I was about 15, 14, he went off to RADA, which is a very established theatre school in the UK.
Can you explain the acronym for us?
It's the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. And it's where huge actors trained, like I think Olivier and Anthony Hopkins and
A lot of
like that.
American actors will go over there and do the summer program.
Yeah, they do
or
summer Shakespeare programs and things like that, which are very popular with American actors who want some more theatre experience. And so he kind of did it, and being from Wales, seeing that kind of intangible dream of being able to achieve, you know, going to the theatre in London and being on the stage suddenly became more of a reality. And I saw him do it, and I was like, I was crazy about musicals, he was crazy about plays. And I remember being terrified when I actually got into drama college, and it was like my last year, because Michael had had such good fortune when he graduated from drama college, and I was just, all the family just sort of assumed that it was easy, you know, because he made it look easy. And somehow I've kind of managed to make it look easy too. I don't know how that iron has struck twice. Is that the right thing? But so I've just been incredibly lucky. I've done lots of roles in the West End, Truly Scrumptious in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Sandy in Grease, Eponine in Les Miserables, and Mary Poppins on the first ever touring production of Mary Poppins back in the UK. And I've just had an absolute ball, really, and I do consider myself to be the luckiest person in the world.
Now, also, did I read that your great-great-grandmother was a first lion tamer?
Yes.
I just found that. Yeah.
She came over to America. We found like her details on shipping lists and things like that. She came over to America for 3 years and worked with Barnum. Barnum wasn't alive at the time, but she worked with his company that was still going, and I think is still going. Yeah. And she toured the United States with like a wild beast show.
Yeah. And she was the first woman lion tamer.
She was the first woman lion and elephant tamer, apparently. We're still kind of trying to find proof, but there were lion tamers before, but she went in there with the elephants as well. She wanted to get one.
It was in your blood. You had to do this.
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen a photograph of her daughter with the baby lion cubs, and what's really quite uncanny is that it could be me, that her daughter, who is my Auntie Flora, who died when she was like 90-something, and I met when I was about 5, it as a toddler, looks exactly like I looked like as a toddler. It's quite uncanny and spooky. And
excellent.
It's very special, so yeah.
Thank you.
I'm lucky.
Gavin.
Hi, so I started off pretty much the same. Well, if anyone's seen a chorus line, you know Mike sings, I'm watching.
How many people
Cisco
here have
Bit
seen
of
Chorus
Fun.
Line? There we go.
Well,
Good.
sadly, I am Mike, because my sister was very shy. She's 3 years older than me, and so her primary school teacher, elementary school teacher said she should go to ballet class to get a bit more confident. And so she would go to class, and I would be that annoying kid brother going, what did you do today? Show me, show me, show me. And showing my age, she also started doing disco dancing. This was in about 1979, and I was 8 then, and I wanted to... John Travolta was all the big thing with Grease and Saturday Night Fever, and she'd show me her little disco routines, and I copied, and eventually my mum said, are there any boys in the class? And there were a few, and so I started off with disco dancing, and then very quickly went on to like jazz, proper sort of jazz classes, and then tap, which is the thing that I kind of enjoyed the most. And I did the community theatre thing. My sister got involved, I very quickly got involved, and then mum and dad were involved within a year, and we were all prancing around on the stage in probably terrible productions of musicals, but we thought they were amazing at the time. And yeah, I did one professional job when I was 11. I went and auditioned for the first stage production of the film Bugsy Malone, which is an amazing musical film if you can Netflix it or something. It's set in the 20s. It's a musical. It's directed by Alan Parker, and every part is played by kids, but they're playing adult roles. It's fabulous. Jodie Foster is a big role in it. So I did the first stage production of that in London in the West End, and that's the only professional job I did as a kid. And then at 16 I went off to college in London. I grew up 2 hours east of London, did 2 years training in performing arts, and then started getting jobs in the West End and around the UK, and mostly chorus, understudying, leading roles, getting a few shows as the lead and thinking it was the best thing in the world. And when this role came along, I auditioned for this back in 2003. That was my first audition, 2003, November of 2003. I got the job in February, because it takes that long. You keep going back for callbacks all the time. And the first performance was in Bristol, a few hours west of London, at the Tryout in September 2004, and I've been playing Bert somewhere in the world ever since. And it's the best role I've ever played, and I love it.
Great. Thank you. Blythe.
Hi, I'm Blythe Wilson, and I'm originally from Vancouver, British Columbia. And my father was a professional figure skater, so I sort of grew up watching him skate, but then there was no money in skating, so his parents made him quit skating, and he got right into, they both became medical people. So, and my parents have always said that I moved from the day I was born, and I actually started rocking myself to sleep and would move the crib all the way across my baby room. So they said that I just had this movement in me. So I was dancing from very, very young, about 4 years of age, and got right heavily into ballet and started taking my Royal Academy of Dance ballet exam. So I got right into ballet, and it wasn't really until high school where we were doing choir practice, and somebody beside me said, a teacher just encouraged me to sing, because I was very shy and always thought I just really want to do ballet, but I just didn't have the skill or the technique to be a ballet dancer. So it was through someone else who sort of encouraged me and brought me out of my little ballet shell to open my mouth and sing a bit. But in Vancouver, there was a 2-year program that I auditioned for and got in, and I was quite young. I was right out of high school, and it was called the Vancouver Playhouse Theatre School. And it was a 2-year program, so that was a full theatrical training program. And that, I actually left early. I was so frustrated because the first year and a half was all movement. So being a dancer, I was just so frustrated. I wanted to carry on. So off I went and got an agent and tried to audition and just landed a show, and that took me to Prince Edward Island, right outside Halifax, and I started dancing in the full season there. But I've been very lucky in my career and had people in shows encourage me, and classes that they've offered and voice technique that they've offered. So I've just been, we really never ever really finish training. You're just constantly trying to train, it seems. But I was in Toronto and met my husband in Toronto, and he and I have moved now full-time in Toronto. Someone else is living in my house. I really don't ever live in my house, it seems. We've owned our house in Toronto for 10 years and maybe lived in it for 2 years out of the 10. But for being a part of Mary Poppins, I auditioned in last December. And it happened very quickly. I flew to New York and auditioned for an entire afternoon. It was about a 5-hour audition of going in and out of the room to meet with the team. And I found out actually that night, flying home, that they wanted me for the show. So it was pretty fast for me. But I've been with the show just since January, so I'm just up to my 6-month point. But in Canada, Laird is also a Canadian. There's the Stratford Festival of Canada that does Shakespeare, but it also does a numerous amount of musicals. So I've been very lucky there and been with the company for over 5 seasons. And they also have the Shaw Festival, which I was very lucky to be a part of, a company member of there. So I've done wonderful, wonderful shows and some leads for them too.
Great. Laird.
Well, I was going to say that my parents were not professionally involved in the theater, but my father loved opera, and so my first experience with the theater was going with my mother and father to see the opera in Calgary, Alberta. And I see a lot of parents with their young ones here, and I can imagine that a lot of children are kind of getting their first exposure to theater kind of in the same way. I just remember going with my parents and being really amazed at the spectacle, and I started studying singing, taking singing lessons. I guess I loved to sing and took lessons when I was younger, and then I had a bit of a detour in my late teens. I kind of almost accidentally got interested in ballet, and ended up going to a ballet school in Montreal, and I spent 2 years training, and then I danced in the National Ballet of Canada for 2 years. And but at some point I kind of realized as well that I probably didn't want to do that, just ballet as a career. I guess I really, was interested in acting and loved singing too much to give it all up. So I ended up pursuing musical. I ended up getting into the production of Phantom of the Opera. There was a long-running production in Toronto. It ran for 10 years, and I got into that production, and that was kind of my introduction to the big world of professional musical theater. And then since then, Blythe and I met at the Stratford Festival, and I did about 8 years there, and we worked together a couple times in different shows, although we've never really worked opposite each other, but we've been in shows together, so that was really, really fun when I found out that Blythe had been cast in this role. Because I was in the tour of Mary Poppins from the beginning. When we started the tour, we rehearsed in Chicago and began the production in Chicago, and went for about a year. I was in the ensemble, and I understudied the role of George Banks, and then I was lucky enough to get cast in the part, and then found out that Blythe got, somebody said to me, oh, the girl who's playing your wife is from Canada as well, and do you know her? And then they said her name, and I just could not believe it, because somebody had mentioned to me, I knew that they were looking, and I thought of Blythe, but I just assumed that she wouldn't, I thought, well, she's going to be, she lives in Canada. I don't know why I didn't think the same thing for me, but anyway, and yeah, my introduction to Mary Poppins was that I actually went over to London, England, and my girlfriend at the time had seen the show in London, and she raved about it, and so I got off the plane and had just enough time to catch a matinee of the show in London, and I saw Gavin do the show. It was really, really fun, yeah, and just absolutely loved it. And then the show was coming to Broadway, and I was one of the hundreds of people who got an audition for the Broadway production, but didn't get past the first stage of the auditions. And 2 years later, when it came around again and they were looking to set up the tour, I got an audition, and that time I got lucky and got into the show. So that's how it happened.
Great. Wonderful stories. To see the background of what brought you here, in the shows nowadays, it seems like almost everyone has to be a triple threat. And when I say triple threat, you're able to sing, dance, and act all equally well. Do you consider yourselves all triple threats, or are there things that you do better or less that you had to say, if I'm in this business, I have to work on my voice more because I came from dancing, or dance from acting? Can you guys talk about that? Because so many shows, it really seems that you need to do it. And in Mary Poppins, we see all of you not fake it, but do it really well.
And we can fly, too.
I was going to say, and a quadruple threat, because you're also tap dancing upside down and flying.
I think, for me, I went to a college that kind of specialized in singing and acting, and with a little bit of dance thrown in. It's now getting stronger with the dance, but I knew I had to work on my dance extra hard to do well, because I think singing and acting comes easier to me than the dancing. I did dance as a kid, and ballet and tap and everything like that. And a lot of people say, if you smile nicely up here, people won't look at what's going on down here. So I think I managed to blag it quite well. But my dance training is the least of my training, really. Everything else was the singing and acting technique. So I'm sort of a 2.5 threat.
Oh, okay. Do you still take classes?
No.
Okay.
And I'm the opposite. My college was primarily dance, and we did some acting and singing. And I think when you go to a college like that, looking back, I wish I'd gone to a more acty. I would like to go to a more of an acting college, because as a you come out of college as a dancer, and really the most you can hope for in musical theatre is to be in the ensemble, because you haven't had the training, and so you think you don't have the ability to say lines or to sing lines on your own, but you can dance with everyone else. And so, often I think people say, what order do you put it in? And I would always put, dancer, singer, actor. But as but that's not the order I want to be known as. I would like to be known as an actor, singer, dancer, I think, at this age and this stage in my career.
But you actually are, though.
Oh, but yeah, I hope I can do all three okay.
Well, I just find, having started out as a dancer, a full technical ballet, jazz, hip-hop, funk dancer, it was just so nice to be able to transition into acting and singing. And it was all through people sort of pushing me through. I didn't really know that there were classes you could sign up for or a technique that I could draw from. And it was just through just the courtesy of other people and performers that I find just being involved professionally in the business since I was 17, just watching and learning and just people taking you under your wing. Performers just do that naturally. It's just, they're very maternal that way of taking people in. And, there might be some future students here in musical theater or Shakespeare or stage, and it's just a matter of other people encouraging you to let go of the fact that you think that you are a dancer and that you have no voice. And I love the transition from letting go of the dancing and being known more as an actress and a singer. And then you start moving and people are like, do you dance? It's like, well, yes, actually, I do. I did. I don't know as well as the 21-year-olds anymore, but I could certainly keep up. So, yeah, and just training, usually, I've fallen right into a sort of pattern of loving yoga right now. I find that is really safe and healthy and keeps my body in shape.
And Blythe, you've done a lot of classical work too. You were saying about the Stratford and the Shaw.
Well, the beautiful thing at these festivals is that they constantly offer classes for their actors because you're in a very small little town that we're working in. So they offer you Alexander classes, which is body technique, and dance classes. They offer voice technique and Shakespeare. You can work on your monologue. Or if there are no classes, you could just go up to someone within the company and ask them to work on your monologue. Just for free, just for a bottle of wine. You just offer, if you have a big audition coming up, that's the best thing, is working with your colleagues, getting rid of those nerves and getting up and pretending that audition is happening. Yeah, but those places I found a lot of just really challenging work and pushing you.
Yeah, because there's so much technique that's involved in it. Yeah, well, for you.
Well, I was just thinking it's interesting, I guess, in theater also how much those disciplines all kind of meld together, because I had an experience like when I was in Phantom in Toronto, I got the chance to understudy the Phantom, and he doesn't dance at a step in the show, but I don't think I would have done it if I didn't have this background in dance training, because they had a lot of opera singers who they would audition for that role who could sing the role beautifully, but they could not move in the way that people in the musical theater, in a real dance background kind of discipline could move, if I can say that. And so all of those things that you train in, they come into your career in more ways than you expect. And I think even in all the shows that I've done, there's always some element of dance in musical theater in any role, even if it's just in a kind of way of moving on stage that's not, that is
heightened from
yeah,
real life.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you really see it in Mary Poppins because both Caroline and Gavin, you guys dance so much more in the show, but watching you move, it doesn't surprise me that you had just great dance training, because I was seeing the way that you moved, and you're working with a bustle, and you're working with a train, and the same way that you're working with your character work, you see the journey of your character from the beginning, very closed up, and then he lightens up, and the dysfunction of the family gets him to a place where he can dance. You really couldn't do it without the technique. So
We
it's neat to hear
asked for
this.
the dream ballet between Mr. and Mrs. Banks for the second act. They didn't go for it.
See, it's always something else. Since we're starting to talk about characters, can we talk a little bit about how each of you approached your characters, since this musical is based on both the books and the movie, and there's songs that were then written for it and new scenes written for it. Did you take a look at the film? Did you take a look at the books? How did you research your characters, and then how did you come to your Mary, to your Bert, to your down the line?
Well, kind of similar to you, I grew up absolutely loving Mary Poppins, and I could probably recite you the whole film right now.
But you're a little smarter. You didn't
But-
jump off the roof.
I didn't jump off the roof. No, no, do you know what I did do, though? I invented a swimming move that I called the Mary Poppins swimming move, which was my interpretation of her sliding up the banister. It was very good.
If only we had a pool of
If
water.
only I could demonstrate it for you right
Afterwards,
now. But
before
what
the
a
show
shame.
tonight, if we go out to the fountain in front of the Kennedy Center, she will be demonstrating this move.
So I knew the film very well, and actually, before I could read, my parents would read me the books as like bedtime stories, and I'd be like, "This isn't like the film. This is very different," because the books are incredibly different to the film. She's a much starchier character in the books.
It's horrible.
She's really horrible. She, like, when Jane and Michael when she takes them on all these wonderful adventures, they come back and they say, "What a great day we've had, Mary Poppins. We jumped into a chalk drawing and we went exploring." And she says, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" But what she does do is she leaves a little bit of evidence from that day behind in the bedroom. So, they see a scarf from maybe the chimney sweep hanging on the door as she walks out and slams it, saying, "How dare you suggest such a thing?" And there's the scarf on the door, or something similar to that. So I remember being really surprised how different they were, so I never ever read them again. But then when I came to do the part, I thought I really should look at the books again, and it was really interesting, because how they have done this is really clever in the kind of meld between the book and the film, and obviously I did watch the film again because I just couldn't resist it, and but what we feel really lucky about is that because the show is a different embodiment of Mary Poppins, that I don't have to copy Julie Andrews, and you don't have to copy Dick Van Dyke. We can actually put our own interpretation on it. And what I love about Mary is that she has so many different aspects to her character. She can be mischievous, she can be naughty, she can be very proud, she can be very vain, she can be very haughty, and she can be loving, she can be caring. And so every night I can pretty much play with all those different aspects of her. So she stays really bright every night, I hope. And because I'm still kind of exploring all those different possibilities. So it's like it is an ongoing process. We learn and learn and learn every day more about our characters.
And I think with all of you, as I talked about, Laird was the journey. In the film, I never really felt that there was an A to Z. That once Mary, she was Mary, and for each one of you, you really took me on a journey, and I said, wow, this is completely new to me, and oh, wow. And so if people have only seen the movie, you see this is such a reason for seeing it. It's almost like, yeah, here's a book that's now in 3D. Yeah.
I kind of feel, again, very glad that we're not just doing carbon copies of the movie and the characters in the movie. I love that we have these new characters that come in, especially in Act 2, there's new characters involved. I love how the creatives have taken a storyline from a book, from one of the books, but then put that storyline with a different character from the book. Like, just for instance, the Mrs. Corrie and the Annie and Fanny who are in the sweet shop, which is where we do Super Cow, which obviously doesn't happen in the book, and the song in the movie is in a carousel, but their storyline is what they do every day, every night. They climb up ladders and they light the stars. And so even though they don't do that in our production, in Act 2, when we do Anything Can Happen, all the ensemble are dressed as starlighters and they're lighting the stars and we're all up in the heavens. And so I love the fact that only we know that, well, the Corries light the stars, but we've taken that bit of the story from the book and this bit, and they've made this Anything Can Happen song in Act 2. And it's just so great to then read the books and go, oh, and then read lines from the books and lines from the movie that you have forgotten. I'm singing the only scene that me and Laird have together is the gingerbread stars scene. And after we've talked about the gingerbread stars, which is only in the stage show, from then on, it's identical to the movie. So some scenes are identical, and some scenes come from the minds of our fabulous creative team. And on one last thing that I love is the fact that I'm not just being Dick Van Dyke, is Bert gets to be such a narrator in the stage version.
Right.
I'm constantly grabbing the audience, I hope, and pulling them into the next scene. I'm the only actor on stage that gets to look you in the eyes and goes, hey, do you want to come to the sweet shop? Do you want to see where Mary's taking the kids next? And that's such a joy as an actor to be able to break the fourth wall and kind of chat to you all and say, come on, let's go on another adventure with her.
Great. Blythe.
I did see the movie. When I found out I was going to be a part of the show, I did actually grab the movie at the closest video store, but I had seen it in snippets all throughout my life, but I had never seen all of it through.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Never seen the whole movie
Never
until
seen
I
it
got the part.
Until you're part of the production. And I actually came very late to this show. I remember hearing about Mary Poppins and hearing about auditions happening for it, but I had never been to New York to see the production or to London to see the production. So I came very late to the production. And when I joined in January in LA, it was very strange because the show was up and running and existing. So the show was right across the street from our rehearsal hall, where there were 6 of us that joined with Caroline and me, and there were about 4 others, and we all joined. And everyone had seen the show except me. So it was very odd rehearsing, learning, singing every day, all this music, and trying to take in this show, but not having ever seen it. And the creative team, Anthony and David Caddick, purposely kept us away from the production. They just wanted, there was a lovely lady doing Mrs. Banks, Megan, and they purposely kept me away and all of us away from viewing the show. They loved what Megan was doing, but they just wanted me to create my own Mrs. Banks. And I thought it was in a way, it was difficult because I knew it was happening every night at 7:30 and I couldn't go see it. And on the other sense, they said, until your blocking is complete, until you have done your first run through, then you are allotted to come and see the show. And I was so thankful for them because when I did view and see the show, her rendition of Mrs. Banks and mine were completely 2 different takes, and it was just wonderful to see, having had my own sense of who I felt my Mrs. Banks was and seeing her interpretation. It's a very odd way of learning a show, whereas, usually you get together and you create a show together from the bottom up. So it was very, very different for me coming in and not knowing hardly anyone. I only knew Laird in the company, but not knowing the show at all, and knowing the show was living and breathing and existing 8 shows a week, but I wasn't part of it. So it was a very different way of joining a company.
And what's great about this show and our creative team, our director and choreographers, they do keep coming back. I've been very lucky to be involved from the very beginning. So I've done Bristol, London, New York, and now the tour. And every production where I've left the old one and started with a whole new bunch of people, they do start again. Yes, the lines are the same, the songs are the same, and the dance routines are kind of the same, but it's a new bunch of people, and they're always coming back and tweaking it. Like, it's just opened in Holland and it's about to open in Australia, and you can guarantee that the creatives will then come back to us and put in the changes. Like the bits that they liked better in Holland. Not carbon copy, but if scenes slightly change or lines slightly change and they work better, they want every production that's running to keep up with the latest one.
Because they did that with the Broadway to London.
Exactly, yeah.
A couple like the umbrella scene.
Yeah, they put things in, when we opened on Broadway, they went back to London and put in the better things.
Great. How about for you, Laird?
Well, I was just thinking, you were talking about the arc that the characters have, and I think the writer of the text, the dialogue of the musical, the book, gave a really fantastically kind of relevant storyline for the family, the down-to-earth part of the storyline, which is just the family that's kind of falling apart, and my story that I'm telling of this guy who's, in the wrong profession and overworked and under, just completely going on the wrong tracks. And George has a line in the show where he says, "The things that really mattered, I lost along the way." And I think I just misquoted my own line in the show. The things that really matter, I lost on the way. And I just think it's the story that they're telling with the family is so it's really, really high stakes and really relevant, and I think there's a great journey but very easy to tell because it's so well written, and I think it's just something that everybody can feel very easily, that it's you can be very sympathetic for this situation that they've got themselves into. Yeah, well, I was understudying the role, and that is true. That's another, experience that you have as an actor, is that I did the show for a year, and I was the understudy to Carl Kensler, who played the role and is now playing it on Broadway. And of course, you see someone else's interpretation, and actually, one likes it, or I did, so there's probably a lot of things in the show that I've kind of, are a bit of a tribute to Carl. But of course, there's other things that when you get into the rehearsals and it's just you doing it, then the director says to you, now really, let's take this all back and, strip it down to the bare bones again, and really rethink every moment that we're doing on stage, and really examine how all of it feels to you, and because I think that's the main thing, and definitely with this role, it's about trying to really get clear on what everything is making your character feel, what people say to you, how that makes you feel, and then trying to tell it, be very clear for the audience in exactly what's happening in each stage of the story, so that they're able to understand this big change that happens to the character. So it has challenges when you cover someone and then you take over the role, but of course it's really it's nice to get to do it yourself.
And just to relate to the audience of how unique this is for shows that do take that time, because there's so many long-running shows or that go on a tour, and they want you to just create the same thing, that you work with a stage manager in a room by yourself, and you better do it almost exactly like the other person. So this is very unique and wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
What was really interesting was when I was back in the UK, I did a small it was a nice concert. It was for celebrating 25 years of the work of Styles and Drew, who are the people who've written the new music for the show, brilliantly, may I add. And they got me and Scarlett Strallen and Lisa O'Hare, who are all people who'd played Mary Poppins before, to come in and do a trio version of Practically Perfect. And that was really good fun. But what I found really fascinating about it was that Scarlett, myself, and Lisa were all, if I say so myself, really good, but also completely different interpretations of Mary Poppins. It would have been really boring if we'd all come on stage and were complete carbon copies of each other. And yet, every take that we had of Mary was just as valid as the other person's take. And so that was really exciting to sort of see that and go, oh wow, that's really cool. And yet it's nowhere near what I do, but it was really exciting.
Beautiful. And Blythe?
Oh, I was just going to say that the creative team really, when they were with us, it was amazing because they really allowed Laird and I to find our scene work together. But sometimes Laird would be at his matinee and I was working with a stage manager or a dance captain. And so my Mr. Banks was now a woman, and she was also on text, on script, and wouldn't quite know the blocking that Laird and I had figured out. So you really have to be open to these rehearsals when you are rehearsing these new technical shows.
And I know it was for all the understudies in the show. We're all lucky enough to have 2 understudies, so that if we're sick or injured or go on vacation, they take over for us for a while. It's very hard for all the understudies because 3 out of the 4 principal leads changed and were allowed to do their own thing and kind of go wherever they wanted. And then, unfortunately, those understudies who know the part and have been on for it then have to go back into rehearsal and learn Blythe's way of doing it and Laird's way of doing it. So it is hard for the understudies.
Keeps it fresh.
But it keeps it fresh, and because after a year of doing a show, the last thing you want to do is come in for rehearsals. You just want to do the show at 7:30 every night. And but that's the way it is. I was an understudy for years in many shows, and if you're lucky, like Laird and I, eventually you pop up to the principal role.
We have been chatting for a while, and I want to make sure we have some time for some folks in the audience that might have questions. We have this microphone set up here in the front, so if anyone has a question that they'd like to ask the cast about the show, bring yourself up, introduce yourself, and we'll take a couple of those questions. And I'm going to start out by a question that was given to me right before I came in. part of the dance for you, Gavin, is to dance on the proscenium and for the ceiling. How do you audition for a show where you have to tap dance on the proscenium and on the stage, and how do you rehearse it in a rehearsal hall?
Well, I obviously didn't know about this fabulous trick that I do. For those of you who haven't seen it, I'll probably ruin it for you now, but you'll look forward to it because it's an amazing trick, and I'm just the lucky actor that gets to do it. But they built me a swing frame. So imagine just a swing without the swing on it, but just 2 wires, and I could stand on a chair. I wear a harness very tightly around my waist, over my shoulders, under my crotch. And I could stand on a chair, hook myself up. They took the chair away, and I could flip upside down, and there's a platform. And they left me in a room. Not on my own, there was always a stage manager there in case I fainted and just hung there. But they left, the choreographers of the show, Stephen Mear and Matthew Bourne, were very kind. They said, have some time by yourself and tell us what you can do upside down. Because tapping hasn't really been done upside down. As far as I know, Fred Astaire famously on film danced around a room, but of course they just moved the room round. So he was always upright, but when you watch it, it looks like he dances round, but it's the house moving round. And so I just tried tapping upside down, and of course tapping is all about gravity. You only make a noise if you land on the floor again. But when you're upside down, you take your feet off the ceiling. They don't go back on the ceiling unless you push them on the ceiling. So it was a weird way. I mean, I tell people if you lie on the floor with your feet on the wall and just try to make some noise, you have to push your feet back on the wall to make the noise. So that's what it's like. I worked out this routine. They put music to it. Then the musical director came in and said, oh, well, while you're there, you could sing upside down as well. So they added that. And, it kind of developed from... the original idea was Stephen Mear said to the designer, with the set for Step in Time, I want chimneys that there's chimneys who can sort of jump off and run up, like stepping stones. And then he said, and I'd love Bert to do something like Donald O'Connor in Singing in the Rain, where he just flips off the wall upside down. Well, that developed into, well, why doesn't he walk up the wall? And then it was, well, why doesn't he walk across the top? Why doesn't he tap dance? Why doesn't he sing? So it kind of just, but the first time I went up, I got about halfway up, and that's all I could do the first day. And because the fear of being that high upside down on 2 tiny wires on your hips is a bit scary, but you gradually just get used to it. And now people ask me, what's it like tapping upside down? And I can honestly say after 6 years, it's just part of the show. I don't even think about what could happen, because touch wood, it never has happened. It's all computerized. The wires and the movement is exactly the same every night, so I know exactly where I'm going to be on what count, and it's fine.
This must bust the hardest understudy job in the business then, to understudy your role.
Yes, well, randomly, Laird in the first year understudied me, and he still occasionally goes on for me, even though we have 2 other understudies. He's kind of an emergency Bert, just in case we're really down. But it's hard whenever a new person comes to understudy me. I can be very cocky and go, oh, it's so easy, and I can hopefully make it look easy. But then I'm sure a year ago when you first put the harness on, it's like, oh my God,
Yeah,
I was like that when I started.
Gavin makes it look so easy when he does it that when I had no idea how hard it was. So when the first time I did it, it's really hard to do. It's hard to do. He makes it look simple, but
of course I don't fly over audience members, so I'm not going to land on anyone if something goes wrong.
Can we talk about that also? How was that for you? Was it the first time that you had flown in a show?
Yes.
Witches, did you?
No, I
fly
didn't.
in?
I flew as an understudy in Witches of Eastwick. I did a show called Witches of Eastwick back home and played like an ingenue part, and then in the second cast I was like an emergency cover for one of the witches as well. But I never did it while there was an audience watching. But I do remember when we were rehearsing, I know that Danny, who was my Bert back in the UK, for his audition, he had to go upside down.
Oh.
Or before they gave him the job, they had to see that he could sing and basically if he didn't collapse upside down, then he got the job. And also, other things too. But I do remember during rehearsals, as it got closer and closer to us leaving the rehearsal room and going to Plymouth and actually having that moment of going, okay, now you're going to fly, that I just remember feeling, sick to my stomach and just so nervous of all the potential possibilities that could possibly go wrong. And then somebody told me about an accident someone had had, and I was like, please don't tell me that right now. But actually, for me, I find it the easiest part of the show. I'm not pulling a mirror out of a carpet bag. I'm not tap dancing. I'm not singing. I'm not being a strict nanny. I'm not having to, think about anything physical at all. I just have to hang there and look elegant, and keep my heels like that. And I kind of liken it to, one of those lifts you go up when you're skiing. I sort of, hop in, up I go, and I just what I love when I'm flying over people is that there are little lights that pick up people's faces, and I love seeing the children's faces. That's wonderful. But when you see the parents and the grandparents, and they're like looking at you, and their child is next to them going, oh,
crying,
that really makes me, all warm and gooey inside.
We love it backstage because by the time Caroline's flying at the end of the show, we're all done and we're just waiting to bow. So we're at backstage having a drink, picking our nose, talking a bit, bitching someone off in the show, like, he was terrible tonight, what? We're totally out of character, but we can hear the cheer and the applause of the audience, and it's fabulous as she starts to fly. You hear this sort of realization that she's not just flying across the stage, she's flying towards us. And it's fabulous that you hear the stalls, the orchestra applause, and then you hear cheers of the first balcony, and then you hear even bigger cheers of the top balcony, because they've been so far away for most of the show in what we call the cheap seats, even though they're not cheap, that when you hear the cheer of people that have bought the cheapest seat and don't think they're going to see a face, and it's just fabulous that we hear that every night, and we're like, they can say, I got up really close to Mary Poppins. Yeah.
It's quite a high for us being on stage and being able to be a part of that magic, because she flies right over our head and we get to see her fly every night, and I just feel like that's such a gift as a part of the show, and that was a real highlight the first time I had seen it in LA, that realizing she is flying and then saying, I'm going to be on stage and I get to watch her flight. So it's quite a treat for us.
I usually get to give you a
kids.
little look back, but here in the angle of my flight here, I'm like, I actually can't do it. So I've given up on that for DC, unfortunately.
A question I've not been able to ask a group of performers before, because I haven't had this makeup for it, of the difference between British audiences, American audiences, Canadian audiences, American audiences. Is there a difference in just anything that comes to mind?
There is a difference. I think this show will always bring out a warm response from any audience, and the responses you get in London and on the UK tour, they were fantastic. What's really interesting to me is the bows, because everyone's on their feet straight away, and that's really exciting. That's
not a
very
British thing,
rarely
is it?
happens. No, if you have a standing ovation, you have had to sweat and toil all night for someone to stand, which is what we do actually. But if you get a standing ovation, you feel really lucky. Whereas here, I just take it for granted now. I'm like, yeah, standing up.
Or if
fine.
we don't get one, if you don't stand, the curtain comes down and we go, well, they were terrible. Worst audience we've ever had, just because you didn't stand at the end. But
I'm not coming back to Fort Lauderdale again.
99% of the time, you're standing.
But there are some lines in the show which at home never got laughs, and I always thought, that's actually a really funny line, why isn't that getting a laugh? And here it gets a laugh. And then there is one line in the show here which used to bring the house down at home, but here goes for
you
nothing.
cannot get a laugh.
What line is it, do you know?
It's a line in Supercalifragilistic where the little boy swears, and
But it's only a swear word in England.
yeah, I don't think it's a swear
It's
word.
the word
here,
bloody.
It's the word bloody.
And,
So
in England, you do not say, you bloody
you don't
annoyed
say
me.
that under
You
the
don't
age of
say,
16, so the fact that a child is saying that really shocks the British, but here the Americans are like, oh yeah, whatever.
Oh, how funny. How about for Canadian audiences?
Well, the show has not yet been to Canada, but I find every audience is different every night. I mean, that's why we do what we do. Is it's this constant back and forth between the audience and the performers. So I find, you can tell if it's a Friday night or a Saturday night, and your audience has been out for a beautiful meal and had a cocktail, and they're a little bit sleepy. And then you can always hear the Saturday and the Sunday matinees, and there's lots of young children. And, when Caroline makes her entrance, we've often heard, "There's Mary Poppins," You can just hear that interactive, and that's the beauty of what we do,
And city to city around, coming from doing the shows for a year or two in one place, like London or New York, and then now we're on tour, and some places we're just there for 3 weeks. We're lucky enough to be here for 8 weeks. But city to city is a vast difference in the jokes that the audience get and the applause that we get. It's different. Maybe some cities around your country are more sophisticated than others, you being one of the sophisticated ones. But we've been some places and they'll laugh at the slapstick stuff, like in the kitchen, the stuff falling apart in the kitchen. We'll get applauses where other places, certain very cleverly written lines that Mary say will get a big laugh. It's very interesting, the
And
different
then
response.
when we were in Atlanta, we were rock stars, weren't we? It's the hugest theatre I've ever been in, the Fox Theatre in Atlanta. And when we bowed at the end, and Gav comes up and gives me a little peck on the cheek, they went crazy. And we were like, wow.
Would have done that earlier.
Exactly.
That is great. We are almost out of time, so the last question that I want to ask you before we go is, what do you want the audience to go away from after seeing this show? What do you want them to walk out of?
Joy, absolute joy, I think.
If we've made a child or a mum cry because Mary's left, or Michael's given the kite to, or George has given the kite to Michael, and they go, "Oh, I cried at the end," we're like, "Yes, we did our job." Laugh and cry.
I think, this is me getting on my soapbox now, but what I want somebody to go away from Mary Poppins thinking is that I want to go to the theatre again. Especially as this is a show that does have the family at its heart, and that it is one of the first experiences for a lot of children at the theatre. I want this to be an introduction to the wonderful world that is out there of even more brilliant theatre, Not as good as Mary Poppins, but, just opening that world up.
Yeah, I think wonder, and I think I hope that the audience is transported and that they have a magical experience.
And they tell their friends, so we're sold out.
Is everyone coming tonight? Is that the idea? Everyone's coming tonight, or will come, or has come? Oh, I see. It's great. Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah. Well,
I hope we're all right now tonight. Yeah. Got to be good now.
with Laird, Blythe, Gavin, and Caroline, on behalf of the Kennedy Center and Explore the Arts, I want to thank you for the Mary Poppins look-in. You guys will be running here at the Kennedy Center until August 22nd. If you haven't seen the show, make sure you come and see it. And if you've seen it, come back and bring a friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Enjoy the
Enjoy.
show.